few weeks ago, I shared an analogy that I learned from Dr. Russell Barkley about wisdom and knowledge not being the same as knowing how to use wisdom and knowledge. So, wisdom and knowledge is in the back of the brain. The way we use that wisdom and knowledge is up here in the prefrontal cortex. And when you have ADHD, it's like a meat cleaver goes through the middle of your head and never the twain shall meet. You know what I mean? Like we know what we know, but we don't know how to use what we know. So in that video, I said, well, the good news is that your brain is really elastic and there's ways that you can create a bridge between what you know and how to execute on what you know. And I touched on it lightly, but clearly not enough because the overwhelming question I got from that video was, whoa, wait. How do you actually connect the front of the brain to the back of the brain and take the meat cleaver out? So I apologize if I breezed over something that could potentially change your ADHD existence. But in today's video, I am going to break that down even further. So apologies for me not going into greater detail. But if you're here for the first time, my name is Kara McGill. I'm an ADHD coach and I'm here for the busy, ambitious brains who want to get schnizzled on, but they don't know how to use what they know. So if you are one of those people who feels like you've got all the potential in the world and you know you're smart, but you just can't figure out why you keep getting in your own way, you're going to want to watch this video. Let's get into it.
So, as I mentioned, wisdom and knowledge is stored near the back of the brain, and that is everything that we know. Our executive functions are stored in the prefrontal cortex, which is at the front of the brain, and our executive functions help us to use and express everything that we know from our wisdom and knowledge. But when you have ADHD, it's like a meat cleaver goes through the middle of your brain and separates what you know from how to use what you know.
And what this means is that it's not that we don't know what to do, it's that we don't know what to do with what we know. So, what we're dealing with here is an execution problem, not an intelligence problem. Now, the good news about that is that the brain is very elastic. Neurons are constantly wiring and firing together. So, what we can do in our lives is build intentional routines that turn into habits that we don't even have to think about anymore. And when you don't think about a habit, guess what? It happens automatically, which means it's able to pass through that meat cleaver and you can actually do what it is you know. And that is only one way to get around that problem. The other way to get around that problem is to externalize everything in your environment so that it compensates for the fact that you have a usage problem, not a knowledge problem. So, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, we know that ADHD is an executive function disorder, and your executive functions help you with planning and organization, short term memory, task initiation and follow through, motivation. Executive functions also help us track things like the passage of time or our own self awareness, like where our bodies are in space or how we're feeling internally, whether we're hungry or have to go to the bathroom. All of those different operations happen up here. And when they're impaired, it makes the logistics of life and just general adulting very difficult. So when I start coaching a new client with ADHD, the first thing I want to get a grasp of is where is their executive dysfunction getting in their way? And the most obvious place to start with is asking them, what do they want to get coached on? What are they struggling with? Whatever comes up first is what they are struggling with the most. And that gives me a good indication of where to start. The next thing I want to be aware of is their own personal values and strengths. Because if I know what's important to a client and how they show up as their best, it's going to help me connect the dots to whatever they're struggling with. So, my first question to you is where is your ADHD getting in your way the most? Is it being on time for things? Is it task initiation? Is it staying motivated? Is it overwhelm? Whatever that big overarching problem is, that's where you want to start. And by the way, I will leave all of these steps linked below so you can just grab a copy of this and do this work for yourself. So you're starting off with the biggest problem in your life at the moment with ADHD. And let's say it's overwhelmed with too many projects. And as a result of overwhelm, you're in complete paralysis and you're just not doing anything. Now it's time to take that problem and break it down to its very specific essence. So if you are overwhelmed, why is that happening? When does it come up? At what point in the day? Is that at work or is it at home? Is it when you're talking to somebody in particular, or is it when you're laying in bed at 3 a.m. and your anxiety is at level 10 and you're thinking about all the things you have to do? Now ask yourself, what is the trigger for the overwhelm? Is it because you have too many projects? Is it because there's too many things in your line of sight? Where are you in your home or in your office or in your car? when this overwhelm comes up. When you think about those strong feelings of overwhelm, where do you find yourself most often and where is it most triggered? So, when you start to understand where your overarching problem comes up and what triggers it and what is around you when that problem starts to creep up, now ask yourself, is this something internal or is it something external? Meaning, is this a new behavior I need to generate, like starting to say no, or at least pausing before I say yes to any new request that comes my way? Or is it something I need to design in my environment? Like if I am overwhelmed because I keep forgetting to pay my bills, how can I automate payment on the majority of my bills? And yes, you can do this in order to release that cognitive load so that I'm not worrying about whether or not I'm going to come home and my electricity is turned off because I just completely forgot to pay the electrical bill. Now, once you have your trigger list all detailed out, it's time to go through it from a solution standpoint, which means you're not going to dwell on the problem. You're only going to think about solutions. So, if it's being around a certain person that triggers a certain behavior for you, how can you design your life so that you can minimize your time around that person? Or can you eliminate that person completely? And if you can't do either of those things, think about behaviors that you can do to help you self regulate when you are around that person. So let's say it's your boss who triggers you and stresses you out. And as a result, you feel overwhelmed because every time your boss approaches you, they talk really fast. They ask a lot of questions that you don't necessarily have answers for. And they always seem to be stressed out and in a hurry and need something yesterday. And as a result of the way they approach you, your response is to completely shut down. So if they ask you to do things, you're not even really listening, either because your attention is on your own emotions or your rate of processing is slower than their rate of speech. So you're still thinking about what they said 3 sentences ago. So what ends up happening is they might ask you to do something and you just nod because you have no idea what they're saying because their lips are just flopping at this point. And then when they come back to you 3 hours later asking you for that thing and you have no idea what they're talking about, then the drama ensues. What could you do in a moment like this? Number one, if I had the appropriate rapport with my boss, I would have a conversation with them. Not in the moment that they're asking me for something, but maybe during a one on one, say, hey, listen, last week when you asked me to do that thing and I didn't get it done, I know that was super frustrating. So in the future, when you haven't asked for me, would it be possible if you could email an outline of what you need for me first so that I have some context and then we can have a conversation about it? Or if you don't have time to do that, could you come in and walk through the points with me on my whiteboard here? That way I have it in front of me and I'm not going to miss any of the details. Now, I can go on with these examples, but every ADHD brain is a little bit different in terms of what they struggle with and how they approach that struggle. When I was younger, impulsivity, self regulation, and working memory were probably the things that I struggled with the most. As I have matured and taken self care more seriously, I have been able to compensate for my self regulation issues. And I will share a very effective tool with you at the end of this video. I still have short term memory issues. And more so now than before, I struggle with planning and organization, mostly because as an adult, I have a lot more moving pieces in my life. And I know that if I don't externalize my planning and organization, I will never get anything done, which is why I use Notion. And it has been an external scaffolding for me to not only remember everything that I need to do, but to help me plan and think through what I need to do next, whether that's in the context of a week, a month, a quarter. It helps me to build out long term goals and actually stick with them. So I have templates that I use both for personal and for business that really help me structure my own thinking. I will link them below. They're both Notion templates, but they're ideal for ADHDers who struggle to plan, organize, and remember to keep doing things. So coming back to Russell Barkley's meat cleaver in the middle of the head, wherever you're struggling the most right now with your ADHD, take a minute to think about how it's impacting you at a high level, then break down all of the various scenarios and triggers and people and places that contribute to that overall issue. And then think through how you can either change your behavior or your environment to solve for that specific problem. Now, I promised you a self regulation tool that is incredibly effective and you can do it anywhere at any time. Nobody will know you're doing it. And it is so powerful. What I'm about to teach you is a heart coherence technique. I'm currently training with the Heart Math Institute, and this is one of the very simple exercises they recommend to use when you are feeling out of balance or dysregulated. Now, this is going to help you get coherent in your heart. Your heart actually has a brain and a nervous system, and that nervous system sends twice as many signals to the brain as the brain signals to the heart. So there's a lot of communication going upwards, and those signals are sent in the form of an electrical current, which then goes up to the thalamus. The thalamus then takes that information and moves it to the prefrontal cortex so we can execute on what we know. But when we're incoherent, that electrical information becomes staticky. And then the thalamus can't do what it needs to do in order to get coherent messages to the prefrontal cortex. So now we are offline. What's happening in our brain and our heart is completely disconnected. Now, why is that important? Because if you want to be calm and have clarity and control over your attention and focus, you have to get the heart and the brain back into alignment so those messages start flowing clearly again. So what I'm about to show you is a heart coherence exercise that will align the heart and the brain so that they're communicating appropriately and you become way more calm, focused, and present. Let's say you're in a meeting with a bunch of colleagues, or you're at home with all your kids and things are getting a little heated. Because we struggle with self-awareness, we don't often know when we're becoming dysregulated, right? And often we don't see it until it's too late. And at that point, we've blurted something out or snapped at a colleague, and now we're feeling bad. How can we avoid that? Wherever you start to see emotions elevate, whether it's in other people or if you can feel it in yourself, here's what you do. Take your attention to your heart center and start to breathe out of this area. Make your breaths longer and slower at a pace that feels comfortable for you. And just continue to do that. Continue to breathe in and out of your chest and just see how it makes you feel. Get a sense of what's happening in that heart center as you're breathing slower and deeper through your heart, inhaling and exhaling. You might feel a tingling here. You might feel a tingling in the brain. You don't need to close your eyes. You don't need to take on a mudra. You don't need to do anything. You just slow your breath, keep your attention on your heart center, and find a rhythm that works for you and continue. Now, if I can explain that technique and do that technique while also recording a video, then you can probably do this when you're in a conversation with other people. You may not want to be doing it as you're speaking, but the minute you've paused for somebody else to speak, come back into your heart center and just focus on your breath as that person is speaking. So you're still hearing them, but you're also paying attention to the fact that you're breathing in and out of your heart center at a slower rate. And I've got to tell you, the minute you start doing that, it is going to calm you down. And you are going to become a lot more regulated and a lot more able to do the things you know. Now, there's obviously a lot more I can cover on this topic, but again, everybody's situation is going to be unique. So it makes a lot more sense for you to learn how to self-coach yourself out of these scenarios so that you can live your best damn ADHD life. So on that note, guys, I hope this was helpful. Get the cheat sheet down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.